Alfonso Cahero, A Journey into Finance History, Chapter 33, Great Depression of the 19th Century, 1873-1896. In the late 19th century, the world was undergoing profound changes. Industrialization had transformed societies, bringing with it technological advancements and economic growth. However, beneath the surface of progress lurked economic instability and inequality. The stage was set for one of the most challenging periods in history, the Great Depression of the 19th century. It began quietly with the collapse of the Vienna Stock Exchange in May 1873. Panic spread across Europe as banks failed and businesses shuttered their doors. The effects of this financial earthquake rippled across the Atlantic to the United States, where the panic soon turned into a full-blown economic crisis. In the United States, the Great Depression hit hard. Banks closed their doors, factories went idle, and unemployment soared. People who had once lived comfortable lives found themselves standing in bread lines, desperate for a meal. The American dream seemed shattered as families struggled to make ends meet. Farmers were hit especially hard. In the years leading up to the Depression, they had expanded their operations, taking advantage of new technologies and fertile lands in the West. However, falling crop prices and mounting debt left many on the brink of ruin. Families faced foreclosure on their farms, and rural communities suffered as businesses closed their doors. The collapse of the railroad industry was a major catalyst for the Great Depression. In the years leading up to 1873, railroad companies had expanded rapidly, fueled by easy credit and speculation. They laid thousands of miles of track, connecting cities and driving economic growth. But when the bubble burst, it left the industry in shambles. Rail lines went bankrupt, leaving towns and cities isolated and businesses without vital transportation links. Thousands of workers lost their jobs as rail companies slashed costs and cut back on expansion projects. The ripple effects of the railroad collapse were felt across the economy, exacerbating the already dire situation. The Great Depression wasn't just an American phenomenon, it was a global crisis. Across Europe, Asia, and beyond, countries grappled with economic turmoil. Trade ground to a halt as nations turned inward, protecting their own industries and markets. Currencies collapsed, wiping out savings and investments. In Europe, the effects of the Depression were particularly severe. Industrial powerhouses like Germany and Britain saw their economies stagnate, while smaller nations struggled to stay afloat. Unemployment soared, leading to social unrest and political instability. Governments faced mounting pressure to find solutions to the crisis, but their efforts often fell short. For nearly a quarter of a century, the world struggled to recover from the Great Depression. Despite sporadic periods of growth, the economy remained fragile, and millions continued to suffer. Governments tried various remedies, from protectionist policies to massive public works projects, but none seemed to offer a lasting solution. In the United States, the presidency of Grover Cleveland was marked by economic hardship and political turmoil. Cleveland's commitment to laissez-faire economics left many Americans feeling abandoned by their government. It wasn't until the election of William McKinley in 1896 that the tide began to turn. The Great Depression took a heavy toll on human lives. Families were torn apart as breadwinners lost their jobs and homes. Men wandered the streets in search of work, while women struggled to feed and clothe their children. Children dropped out of school to help support their families, their futures dimmed by the harsh realities of poverty. Suicide rates soared as people saw no way out of their despair. Mental illness was rampant, yet treatment options were limited. Families were forced to rely on charity and the kindness of strangers to survive. The scars of the Great Depression would linger for generations to come, shaping the lives of those who lived through it. Amidst the darkness of the Great Depression, there were glimmers of hope. Communities came together to support one another, creating networks of mutual aid and solidarity. Churches and charities provided food and shelter to those in need, while local governments launched public works projects to create jobs and stimulate the economy. In the United States, the election of William McKinley brought a renewed sense of optimism. McKinley's administration implemented policies aimed at boosting industry and restoring confidence in the economy. The passage of the Gold Standard Act in 1900 stabilized the currency and helped to spur investment and growth. Despite the challenges they faced, people during the Great Depression showed remarkable resilience and innovation. Farmers experimented with new techniques to improve crop yields and reduce costs. Inventors and entrepreneurs developed new technologies and products, laying the groundwork for future prosperity. Inventions like the telephone, the light bulb, and the automobile transformed daily life and opened up new opportunities for economic growth. Companies like General Electric, Ford, and Standard Oil emerged as industry giants, driving innovation and creating jobs. The Great Depression also sparked a wave of labor activism as workers sought to improve their working conditions and secure a fair share of the economic pie. Strikes and protests erupted across the country as workers demanded higher wages, shorter hours, and better treatment. The Pullman Strike of 1894 was one of the most significant labor disputes of the era. Thousands of railroad workers walked off the job to protest wage cuts and unfair labor practices. The strike paralyzed rail traffic across the country and drew national attention to the plight of America's working class. In 1893, Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected President of the United States, promising a New Deal for the American people. Roosevelt's administration launched a series of ambitious programs aimed at revitalizing the economy and providing relief to those hardest hit by the Depression. The New Deal included measures such as the Civilian Conservation Corps, which employed millions of young men in conservation projects, the Works Progress Administration, which created jobs in construction and the arts, and the Social Security Act, which provided a safety net for the elderly and disabled. Thanks to the New Deal and other efforts, the United States began to recover from the Great Depression in the mid-1930s. Industrial production increased, unemployment fell, and consumer confidence began to rebound. The country was on the road to recovery, but the scars of the Depression would linger for years to come. The Great Depression changed the course of history, reshaping economies, societies, and governments around the world. It was a period of hardship and suffering, but also one of resilience, innovation, and hope. As the world emerged from the depths of the Depression, it was forever changed, and the lessons learned would shape the future for generations to come. The Great Depression left a lasting legacy that still influences economic policies and social programs today. In the United States, the New Deal programs laid the groundwork for the modern welfare state, providing a safety net for the most vulnerable members of society. The Securities and Exchange Commission was established to regulate the stock market and prevent another financial crisis. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was created to insure bank deposits and restore confidence in the banking system. The Great Depression taught the world valuable lessons about the dangers of unchecked speculation, the importance of government intervention in times of crisis, and the need for international cooperation to address global economic challenges. It was a painful and costly period in history, but one from which we can learn and grow. As we face new economic challenges in the 21st century, the lessons of the Great Depression remain as relevant as ever. By understanding the causes and consequences of the Depression, we can work to build a more stable, equitable, and resilient global economy. As we look to the future, it's important to remember the lessons of the past. The Great Depression was a reminder of the fragility of the global economy and the need for proactive measures to prevent another crisis. By investing in education, infrastructure, and social programs, we can create a more prosperous and sustainable world for future generations. The Great Depression of the 19th century was a watershed moment in history, reshaping the world in ways that are still felt today. It was a time of hardship and suffering, but also one of resilience, innovation, and hope. As we reflect on this period, let us remember the lessons learned and work together to build a brighter future for all.